Everybody, and welcome to our study in Genesis. We're in Genesis chapter 49 tonight. We're going to do a review of 48, and we weren't online for 48, but we're coming to a close here. We're going to be doing Genesis chapter 50 next week, Lord willing, and then we plan on rolling into a study of the book of John. And so we hope you'll join us for that, and that you can gain some knowledge from our discussions as well. Genesis chapters 48 and 49 have a constant theme between the two. They are Israel's blessings. This is Jacob now blessing his sons. In Genesis 48, the blessings are entirely for Joseph's two sons. So let's just pause for a second, and I want to just go over some of the things that we were talking about last week to try to help give us some context to this idea of passing on a blessing. And what we talked about last week, for those who weren't with us, is I asked the question, did your grandparents provide you with any kind of an inheritance? And I don't necessarily mean financial or property. Was there anything they passed down? And first we had to figure out how many of us actually remembered our grandparents. And Bob was saying he doesn't. For me, it was just my grandfather, my mother's father, who was alive and passed away while I was in the Navy, early on in the Navy. But a lot of folks here had great, great memories of things being passed down to them by their grandparents. So for those who weren't here, do you remember your grandparents, Mike?
Yeah.
All four of them?
No. Yeah, well, I met the ones in Tennessee, but I knew the ones in Newport. My mother's grandparents.
Okay.
I saw them every day.
Right. Oh, okay.
I used to go to church with my grandfather every day.
All right. Every day you and your grandfather went to church? Every day?
Every day. Up to the Jesus Savior. And it was funny because when I met the Lord 15 years ago, I called my sister and I said, I can remember going to church with Poppy. And you say this certain set of, you say the Stations of the Cross so many times. Yep. And the church tells you that at the time of your death, you're guaranteed a priest to be there.
Right.
When I died, actually Florida was there. I died to the world. There's reason in here.
Right.
So I remember that.
Yeah.
Because that was something that came. I wouldn't have been there unless it hadn't been for my grandfather. It was just interesting.
Right.
And the high priest.
You're very limited relationships with your grandparents.
Yeah, my grandfather died when I was 5. But I have memories of him. And then my grandmother, when we were little, we used to go visit her until they went to Florida. And I got to see her when I left boot camp in the Navy.
Right, in Orlando. Yeah. Things passed down to you? Obviously, the idea of faithfulness and going to church.
Yeah, my grandmother, she lost all 4. She lost both legs, both arms.
Oh,
to diabetes in those days was a terrible disease.
Yeah, still is today.
Still is.
Horrible disease.
The horrible thing, that was a horrible thing, but my sister was feeding her in bed, and the minute she died, she sat up in bed like she had no aches or pains, and she looked out the window in the parlor because they had it downstairs. She looked out the window and she says, "Oh, isn't that beautiful?" Now the scene outside the window was nice, but it wasn't beautiful. She was seeing heaven, I believe.
Yeah.
And my sister believes that too. So they were coming to get her.
Good.
And, and then she just laid back and died.
I got my paper.
Oh, you want to wait till after we're done? We'll wait after we're done?
I got the paper and I also got the calendar.
Right. Oh, excellent.
Calendar.
Very good. Were you here last week? You were here because you gave me the thing. Okay, so.
Yeah, my grandparents raised me.
That's right.
But I also knew my great-grandfather on my mother's side.
That's a very comming theme here at the O'Brien Apartments.
He used to bake.
He used to bake? So that's easy. And smell is the greatest memory. It's always, that's for my grandfather.
Yeah, we're gonna stay
I smell a cigar, I think of my grandfather. The reason why we brought up grandparents last week was because Israel is not blessing necessarily Joseph, his son. He's blessing his two grandsons through Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim. Manasseh is the older. Do you remember the funky thing that happened when Israel went to bless his grandsons? Yep, he switched his hands, right? So that
the oldest one would be blessed and not the youngest.
The youngest one was blessed over the oldest one. Right, very good. Yep. And that was really strange. Even Joseph objected to it. But this is something that Israel was prophesying. Which one would be a greater tribe later on? And he was saying it would be Ephraim's tribe. That would be it. Remember, we're going to learn a lot more about who's in and who's out in chapter 49. But you can already imagine that there's certain sons that are not going to be a part of the inheritance. One of the other things we talked about was that this is a way that possibly, because Joseph was married to an Egyptian, that this was Israel's way of ensuring his grandsons were a part of the inheritance back in Canaan, the promised land. Okay? So that was the big deal. Because we're going to go into who the 12 tribes are and how the inheritance is passed along. I just want to go back, and if you remember, who's Israel's oldest son? No. Oldest son for Jacob or Israel. It's Reuben. Reuben, okay? Is Reuben in good standing with his father? No. Okay, then we work our way through Levi and Simeon. What happened with those guys?
I remember Simeon got held back.
Well, remember Shechem? Remember Shechem, the town of Shechem?
Yeah, they were kind of killers.
They slaughtered them. So they're going to struggle with the inheritance. They work their way down to Judah. It's number 4 son. We said it's through Judah's line who comes?
Jesus.
Jesus, and before him, the greatest king of all times.
Oh, David.
King David. Melech David. All right? So Judah is now considered and treated as though the oldest, and it's through his line great things happen. Now, mind you, we're going to go through some of the other sons. Other lines are created, other biblical characters come from them. Can I say this? Genesis chapter 49 is a dream for a theologian. For somebody who really wants to study God and study the Bible, you can have a lot of fun studying in Genesis chapter 49. There's so much prehistory in it that we cannot cover in this study tonight. Because you can start following the lineage, the lines of the different brothers, and some amazing people are in those lines. Like Samson. Okay. All right. So having said that, if I may, let me just finish by reading Genesis 48, verse 20. You can just listen, just so, especially for those folks who didn't hear, can hear how it ended. In verse 20, Jacob blessed them that day and said, "In your name will Israel pronounce this blessing. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh." Remember, Manasseh is the oldest of the two. So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, "I am about to die, but God will be with you and take you back to the land of your fathers. And to you, as one who is over your brothers, I give the ridge of land I took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow." Again, Israel is prophesying. Joseph will die in Egypt. We'll see that next week. But Israel is prophesying that Joseph will be buried in Canaan, in the promised land. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yes. Who takes him out of Egypt? Moses. Okay, very big. All right, great. All right, folks. I'm going to read 49. Follow along. It's not easy to follow. This is the blessing of Israel to his sons. Some of it is not going to sound like a blessing. All right? Genesis chapter 49, verse 1. Then Jacob called for his sons and said, "Gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power. Turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel. For you went up onto your father's bed, onto my couch, and defiled it. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. For they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they please. Cursed be their anger so fierce and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. Verse 8. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, O Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion who crouches and lies down, like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, in the obedience of the nations is his. He will tender his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. Zebulun, that's another son, will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His border will extend towards Sidon. Issachar, another son, is a raw-boned donkey lying between two saddlebags. When he sees how good is his resting place and how pleasant his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and submit to forced labor. Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a serpent by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so that the rider tumbles backward. I look for your deliverance, O Lord. Verse 19. Gad, that's another son, will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will attack them at their heels. Verse 20. Asher, who's another son, Asher's food will be rich. He will provide delicacies fit for a king. Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility, but his bow remained steady. His strong arm stayed limber. Because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because of your father's God who helps you, because of the Almighty who blesses you, with blessings of the heavens above, blessings of the deep that lies below, blessings of the breast and womb. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the aged old hills. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. Verse 27. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey. In the evening he divides the plunder. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them, giving each the blessings appropriate to him. Then he gave them these instructions. I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave of the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought as his burial place, from Ephron the Hittite, along with the field. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob had finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Mark.
How you doing, honey?
I'm fine. My daughter said she left her cane down here.
Is that
Oh,
it?
right over there, Carol.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, honey.
Sorry.
Oh, it's quite all right. Do you want to get her a meal now? And yep, there you go.
Well, no, I didn't. Carol, wait.
Yes.
Alrighty, a very different chapter. This is like the reading of a will with a significant change to it. This is almost entirely prophecy. Israel is not necessarily talking about the sons themselves, but he's talking about the people that will be their descendants or their tribes. All right. Before I go much farther, the 12 tribes of Israel are known as the lost tribes of Israel.
That is not familiar to me.
It should be. All right. Later in the Bible, some absolutely terrible things are going to happen to Israel, to the people of Israel. Starting with, they're going to become a divided kingdom. There's going to be the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. They will have bad kings who will turn them away from God. Eventually, peoples from outside of Canaan, outside of Israel, will come and conquer the kingdoms. The people will be taken, many of the people will be taken from that area and taken off to other lands to be slaves, to be workers of other various kinds. This is like for the book of Daniel. You can read about that. Eventually, it's what is known as the diaspora. They're dispersed, and the peoples, the idea of being in what tribe you're in, eventually melt away. And people really cannot, it's really very difficult to say who your descendants are. Okay? So this is what we mean by the lost tribes. Okay. So this is the beginning of it. This is how it's defined. All right. So let's just walk through this again. And then you can see that, for the most part, the sons have all done very well. They've lived good lives. But their descendants, there's a prophecy towards. God knows what the future is. And through Israel, he's telling everybody, all of us, what that future would be. All right. So, in verse 1, then Jacob called his sons together, gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob, listen to your father Israel. And begins with Reuben. Boy, Reuben sounds off. You just take the just take verse 3. How's that sound? How does verse 3 sound?
Good.
Sounds good at the beginning.
Anybody want to be called that? Reuben, you're my firstborn, you're my might. The first sign of my strength. Excelling in honor. Excelling in power. And then verse 4 hits him. All right, see the word excelling in power? No more excelling in power. Why? And Gail can't answer this.
He was in with the fight, right? Killing all the people?
That's Simeon and Levi. They're coming. It explains it there, but I don't know if you remember. He messed around, right, with one of the concubines, right?
Bilhah.
And with Bilhah, all right? And Bilhah. And so as a result of that, Reuben's done. He loses his place as number 1. Verse 5, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. I don't know too many weapons that aren't weapons of violence. But he's making this point that because they use their weapons for violence, let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. For they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they please. Cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. Now, there's a lot more to study about the Levites. They become the Levitical priests. They don't get land. Eventually, Moses does give them a number of cities to live in, but they're not a people group. All right, they're not in the same land together. And then God has other plans for the Levites as time goes on. Verse 8. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies, and your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, O Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion he crouches and lies down, like a lioness who dares to rouse him. So let's just stop there. So Judah, your brothers will praise you. Remember, this is in the company of Joseph. And he really, what he's talking about he's talking about, as he goes further on down, that it's the descendants who will praise you. One of those kingdoms that I talked about in the separation of the kingdoms, one of those kingdoms is called Judah. And this is where the term Jew comes from. It's also one of my wife's favorite movies and one of her favorite characters. Judah Ben-Hur. You guys ever hear that movie? No, you never heard of Ben-Hur?
Oh, Ben-Hur, yeah, but not Judah Ben-Hur.
Well, in the movie, that's his name. Ben-Hur is his last name. Ben means son of. Yep. Judah, son of Hur. Okay, so Judah's father was named Hur. Okay, that's kind of like being named, like a boy named Sue. Right? Yeah. All right. Obviously, Hur doesn't mean the same thing in Hebrew as it does in English. All right. So Judah, look at this. But anyways, we'll see more. Again, if you just wanted to study Judah, and the Judaic line there, boy, that's powerful. I mean, that's what we're named after. So, look at these words he talks about them. Your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Is that a good place to be? Well, if you're the enemy, no. But if you're the one fighting your enemy and you have your hand on their neck, that's a good thing. Your father's sons will bow down to you. Watch this. You are a lion's cub, O Judah. You return from prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness who dares to rouse him. Okay, being a lion, being considered a lion, is that a good or a bad thing?
Good.
Unless your name is Cecil, right? You guys tracking on this?
Yes.
Okay, I think Sharon got that one really good. Yeah, that was a horrible thing that happened.
Terrible.
Terrible thing. So there was a game preserve in Africa where you're not supposed to be hunting the animals. And this hunter was told by the local folks, so you can go into here and track down and kill this protected lion. And this lion was killed. All right, so with the exception of that, being referred to or identified as a lion is a high compliment. It's actually a lot of times reserved for royalty. We sing a song called Lion of Judah. Okay? And it's reference to Christ. Right? Gail and I belong to a Messianic congregation out in San Diego. A Messianic congregation, that's one that's designed for Jewish believers in Jesus. And the name of the congregation was Kehilat Ariel. Kehilat is the Hebrew word for congregation or gathering. Ariel, lion. Do you know anything about the Chronicles of Narnia? Okay, good. Chronicles of Narnia. All right? I read them to my oldest daughter. I know Gail's read them too as well. If you have a chance to see the movie, all right, the first one, The Chronicles of Narnia, the main character, well, actually, not the main character, but yeah, a lion. And he represents somebody in the story. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful story. So that's called, again, The Chronicles of Narnia. And I do recommend seeing it. It's a great, it's a metaphor. A lot of metaphors in them. And but it's kind of neat. But the lion's name is what?
What? In Narnia?
Chronicles.
Aslan.
Is he a tame lion?
He is or he isn't.
He is not a tame lion.
He's not really a tame lion, but he has times where he is.
Well, no. What he is he can act tame, but he is not a tame lion. No, he is not a tame lion. So, anyways, that's that. So that's how Judah is being referred to. Right? It gets even better for the guy. The scepter will not depart from Judah. The scepter is that like pole thing that a king holds on to. I've seen them also like bowls, like a little round thing. You'll see paintings of like King George and stuff like that, and they're holding scepters. That's the indication of an element of power. Who comes from this line?
Jesus.
Yes. King of
King
Kings
David.
and Lord of Lords.
Right.
And also King David. Mm-hmm. Do you see the prophecy? He's prophesying this from Judah, the kings will come. All right. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, and the obedience of the nations is his. Referencing both King David and Yeshua HaMashiach. He's bathed in riches, verse 11. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. And it's good to have a donkey, it's good to have a colt, and it's good to have vines. He will wash his garments in wine. It's like taking a bath, in mineral water. I mean...
Tomato juice.
Yeah, tomato juice, especially if you just got hit by a skunk, right?
Right, my father did.
Oh, no, really? Oh, God.
Because we were down the farm and in the back was all woods.
Right.
And my father, I guess, was walking or something, and when he went home, his father threw him in the garage and made him go in a tub with a lot of tomato juice. And they buried his clothes. It's a horrible, horrible smell. Verse 12, his eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. And so that's the blessing that's put on Judah. Now the other sons, there's nothing really big that jumps out at you. Zebulun will live by the seashore. He will become a haven for ships. His border will extend towards Sidon. Okay. Issachar is a raw-boned donkey lying between two saddlebags. When he sees how good is his resting place and how pleasant is his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and submit to be forced labor. I don't know if that's a good thing. Sounds to me like they make him work, or make his descendants work. All right. Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a serpent by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider tumbles backwards. So Dan's dangerous. But Dan also will provide justice for his people.
It's like a lookout.
Well, so this is the descent. That's a good point. Because not all this is that clear. We don't really know exactly what these are. Because we're coming up on one that's going to be really difficult to figure out. But notice the point here where it says Dan will provide justice for his people. How much do you know the story of Samson? Right. Very strong man. Kind of like a biblical Hercules.
They cut his hair to make him weak.
Delilah, right?
She was coerced into cutting his hair.
He had no business being with her, and she turned out to be a spy and found out what his strength was in, cut his hair, and he loses his strength. It's just all an indicator that he was being disobedient to God. So his enemies, the enemies of Judah, capture Samson now, and they tie him between two poles, two columns, and they cut out his eyes. Remember, because he was just beating the heck out of everybody. He was protecting Israel, and he was the great mighty warrior, and they just couldn't defeat him. So now they captured him, and they did this terrible, terrible thing to him. So now they're partying in this big building with these big columns that hold up the ceiling. Okay, and they're partying all around, having a great time with him. What does Samson ask for? He does ask God.
For the strength to pull up pillars.
Get his strength back, right? So they could. And God gives him his strength, and he pulls the whole building down and kills everybody. That's what it means by Dan will provide justice for his people. All right? At least that's one interpretation of it. All right. Super. All right. In verse 18, Israel pauses and asks God for help. So as he's giving out these prophecies, he's in a constant state of prayer. I look for your deliverance, O Lord. And he gets back to the prophecies in verse 19. Gad will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will attack them at their heels. Located on the eastern part of the Jordan, the descendants of Gad were vulnerable to raids by the Moabites to the south, as the Mesha. All right, and so history does bear this out. Verse 20. Asher's food will be rich. He will provide delicacies fit for a king. Fertile farmlands near the Mediterranean, all right, would ensure the prosperity of Asher's descendants. By the way, just keep in mind how people in these days, how they determined wealth. It wasn't just gold and silver. It was the ability to produce food and animals. We've talked about this before. So this is a blessing for Asher. Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. All right, it might be a reference to an independent spirit that that Naphtali has, but again, nothing definitive about this. Now he gets to Joseph, verse 22. Joseph is a fruitful vine. Well, no kidding, right? He's produced a lot of food for a lot of people. A fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility. But his bow remained steady. His strong arm stayed limber. Because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, that would be God. Because of the shepherd. Ooh, the shepherd. Did I lose you?
What you're reading isn't in my book.
Uh-oh. All right, let's go back. Verse 22.
Right.
Genesis 49:22.
On the 22, it's got Joseph stayed in Europe along with all his family. He lived 110 years and saw the third generation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what you might be reading?
Oh, I'm reading this one.
Yeah, you're reading the notes.
Joseph is sweet with mine.
Right.
Oh,
That's okay. Gail, we have study Bibles.
She's so fast, she's way ahead.
my problem.
We have study Bibles. When you guys see notes, because you'll hear Gail chime in as well and say that my notes say, definitely that's another thing about having the different versions. All right, remember they're saying the exact same thing in different ways, but they also have different notes. So yeah, that's fine. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over the wall. With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility. But his bow remained steady, his strong arm stayed limber. Because of the hand of the mighty one, of Jacob, that would be God, because of the shepherd. The shepherd. References to?
Jesus.
Probably Jesus. The rock of Israel.
Yeah.
All right?
It sounds like him.
Yeah, it sounds like him. Because of your father's God who helps you, because of the Almighty who blesses you, with the blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies below, blessings of the breast and womb. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the aged old hills. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. Okay, so that pretty much puts it to rest. Where Israel stands with Joseph and the importance that he has. Now again, remember, through Joseph's line, now Ephraim and Manasseh are also blessed. So you have Joseph, and then really the blessings have already been passed on to Ephraim and Manasseh. That's how that's going to work out. Okay. Verse 27. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey. In the evening he devours the plunder. All right.
Yeah, but I have a neat note from this. That Benjamin would be a ravenous wolf is that he's successful in war, but also cruel. King Saul and Apostle Paul were Benjaminites.
Benjamites, right?
Benjamites. Isn't that interesting? Because remember,
Makes sense with
Paul
that
was very cruel until he met Jesus on the Damascus road.
Changed his life.
Changed his life.
Changed
Right.
his life.
Right, just like you. You had your road to Damascus experience.
That's it.
So there you have. And again, it's really interesting. Saul is a descendant of Benjamin, which means Jonathan is a Benjamite.
Right.
Okay? Didn't he have something to do with a bow and arrow? Yeah, a lot. When you want to read about King David, you'll read about Jonathan, great guy, and how he was a great archer, and that's actually part of the story about how he notifies David what's going on. So that's the Benjamites. Verse 28. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, And this is what their father said to them when he blessed them, giving each the blessings appropriate to him. Verse 29. Then he gave them these instructions. I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave in the field of Machpelah. We read about that a long time ago. Near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite along with the field. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. Right? There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. Right? Now remember, those guys only had one wife. So it must be Rachel that will be buried with Jacob, because Rachel was his favorite. Right? But Leah is. Remember, Rachel's buried much further away because they were coming back, all right, to Canaan. Rachel dies. So she's not buried there. Leah, as it turns out to the very end, all right, Leah's the one who has the place of honor along with Jacob. God is a faithful God.
Because she was married to his.
She is his primary wife.
Wasn't the one he wanted.
Right.
It was his wife.
Yes. Yes. And she gets the honor. The field, this is verse 32, the field and the cave in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob had finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. So in other words, he was sitting on the bed, pulled his feet off the floor, onto the bed, laid back, and that was it.
Good night.
Amen. So that's how it. Say it. Yeah. So Judah comes from Leah. Remember, Leah has his first 6 sons. Well, has 6 sons. The other 3 women only have 2 each. Yep.
And Leah was like a bondservant, right?
No, those are the other 2. All right. So there was the sisters, right? So there was Leah and Rachel. All right, and then there was Zilpah and Bilhah. All right, and so those are the ones where Leah is providing to Jacob, and Rachel to be able to make up for them to be able to have children. And God does some amazing things.
Always does.
Yep. Do you remember the only woman spoken of as far as being one of Jacob's children? Dinah. That's a daughter of Leah. We know there's lots more daughters, but Dinah's the only one spoken of because of the terrible thing that happened. Questions and comments?
That was hard to take in.
This is a very hard thing to take in. Yeah, like I said, yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, like I said, this is something where...
A lot of stuff.
They marry and what they're doing, the ones doing good, the ones are doing bad, and then the father decides, well, you're going to get this and you're going to get that. And you ain't getting that no more.
Right.
It's like, ah.
Well, the lesson is that even though you're forgiven for your sins, there's still a ramification.
Yeah.
You know,
Not over.
it's not over.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't think a lot of this has to do with Jacob. I think he's just prophesying. He's just saying, God has revealed this to me to share with you, to tell you. And it's unfortunate. But these are the things that happen. All right. All right, guys. Next week, Lord willing, we'll be into chapter 50 and finish up the book of Genesis. Take care and God bless. Bye-bye.